Greetings, fellow Salt and Sassers, and welcome to another video on solo RPGs. I am joining you today from not my home. However, I'm here, my dice are here, my llama's here, and I thought, hey, let's do a quick video. After the video on Colossal, I was debating whether I should move on to smaller RPGs or free RPGs next, thinking that anything that lowers a barrier to entry might be of interest to viewers. Then I decided, hey, let's do a 2-for-1 and cover The Last Tea Shop. Now, before I launch into The Last Tea Shop specifically, I do want to talk about one-page RPGs, such as this one. Sometimes they cover both sides of the page. This one is just one-sided. But I just want to, I don't want to say a word of warning, but I want to caveat it. It might seem that a one-page RPG is easier to approach because there's fewer rules, there's less to wrap your head around, the rules are straightforward. And all that is true. However, what bigger RPGs like Colossal I covered, or other even zines that are bigger than a one page, provide more world building and usually have more detailed prompts, which can really help the player come up with ideas for their stories. For anyone who's ever tried to write anything or come up with a story on any subject whatsoever, the worst thing is the blank page, when you don't actually have anywhere to start. So a lot of RPGs will create constraints that yield the story, either through stats, through prompts, through whatever. Because a one-page RPG is so small, it only offers a little bit of world building and very few constraints. So that means that it increases the burden on the player to sort of self-drive and really look for connection between the little points of reference that are made available through the game. So I'll explain what that means specifically for The Last Tea Shop right now. So, The Last Tea Shop. You run a tea shop on the border of the living and the dead. The recently deceased visit for one last hot drink before their long journey to the great beyond. Time is strange here. Days and memories blur. Nobody visited yesterday, you are sure of that. Someone passed last week, but you are unable to picture their face. The fog is thin, a figure approaches. You stoke the fire. What you need to play? Quiet time, pen and paper, 6-sided dice, and of course, tea. Tea's good. As mentioned, this is a game in which you'll be basically making up a story. So if you're gonna sit around and do make-believe, it's always good to have a warm... Full disclosure, this is iced tea. It's quite hot here, but a nice beverage to accompany you through it. So, the first thing you do is to set up your shop. So you can choose if your shop sits on top of a windy cliff overlooking the ocean, or beside a river on a mountain pass, or in a back alley of an old town. You can roll a die if you just don't know which one you want to do. However, if anything in particular resonates or brings a picture to your mind, I strongly urge you to go with it. In a game like this one, where there's very few cues, anything that provides a particular spark for you, you should really lean into. So, for example, when I was playing, I leaned into a river in a mountain pass because I like the idea that the dead would just go through a pass, right? And then my shop is just sitting there for whatever reason, and they can come in and sort of be comforted through tea. Then you choose an affinity. You can also invent them, but there's a little list here, including luck, incense, frog, secret, shadows, dust, moonlight, etc. When I was doing it, I think I chose memories and moonlight, I think. And these are, again, the game's attempt at trying to get you to think of themes when you come up with a story. Then you can describe your stall sheets, sort of try to, again, visualize your shop. And then we can move on to the play overview. It's actually very, very simple as far as the turn order goes. You first roll to find out how many days have passed since your last visitor. Then you get your result here, which tells you what kind of visitors is coming next. Then you roll to consult the weather, which will tell you both the atmosphere and the emotional tone of the situation. Then you prepare the tea for the visitor. And during that time, you can ask them a question, which could be anything from where did you live, who will miss you, you left something unfinished, what was it? Then you will serve your tea and ask the second question, taking into account the tea's effect. So there's a few tea recipes in here. The basic one doesn't require any specific ingredients. It just warms the soul of your visitors. But then we have a tea of mirth that basically cheers them up, draft of recall, which helps them relive a memory, comforting brew that creates a safe space, and a distance tea, which lets people get calm from a difficult memory. So they would drink their tea, you would ask your second question taking into account this, and then your visitor would leave, possibly leaving you with a little bonus. For example, here the gambler would let you roll 2 dice on the weather table and you get to keep the higher result, which means that the weather has a chance of being basically nicer. The stable hand here with a little cross, I guess, adds 2 to the next day's roll for the visitor table. This table in a way is a timer, I'll explain that, so +2 makes the game advance a little faster. And finally, the little plant symbol here means that you get to roll on the supply table and get another special ingredient, which you can use for those little tea. On your very first turn, you will also roll 3 times to get 3 different kinds of supplies. Now I'll see here from my game, I was a little disappointed with my original roll because I think I rolled something like 2 burn nest fungi and 1 kawaka leaf, but they're all used to make the same tea. So I basically had the ingredient to make only 1 type of tea plus the classic. So if that happens to you, I'm just going to put it out there because that's what I did. There's no rules that says you can't re-roll, right? Like I'm alone, I'm playing, I like diversity. So I would recommend that you just try to make different tea options so that when you encounter visitors, you have more variety. In my game also, honestly, I had one visitor request apple juice. It seemed to make sense in the story. Again, I'm playing by myself, and so if I run a tea shop and my guest wants apple juice, my tea shop owner was really flustered, but then she confessed that she makes her own apple juice, but she's not sure if it's good enough to serve, and that made a bit of a conversation. Anyway, enough about that story. Let's go back here. So, say that we're starting our own game here. The first thing we do, we roll for supply. So we get a 2 for the row, 6 for column. Our first supply will be cloud dew, for example. We would do this 2 more times. Then we would roll once, 3, to get ourselves our visitor, which would be a messenger. Roll again to get the weather. So 4, we get swirling white mist and confused. So basically we get a messenger arriving to us confused in shadow mist. And so this is what we have to start our story. As you can tell, and I mean it, it's a little sparse. So then you kind of have to go the flow. Okay, so they're confused. What would confuse a messenger? Like maybe they were delivering a happy news when they die, so they don't really understand how that happened, for example. So perhaps my first question could be, what's the last thing you remember? Well, I'm making a tea. Now they're confused, so if I had the ingredient for a draft of recall, maybe I would save that question, what's the last thing you remember, for the second question when the draft of recall takes effect. And I could just ask, for example, where do you live? As an intro question. So through this, I would journal their answer. So I would learn more about the messenger as I'm making up their story through my question. Then they would depart, giving me the bonus, and I would roll for my second guess, which would be a 2. As I mentioned, this messenger gives me a +2, so that'd be a roll total of 4, which I add to the 3 I have here. That brings me to 7, the beekeeper. So my next visitor would be the beekeeper. Now I would keep meeting visitors like this until my total rolls exceed 24, where I would meet the veiled one, always the last visitor met. Who they are and what happens next, again, is the conclusion of the story and for me to come up with. So that is what it is. The final little wrench in the story is that every question should be asked, how did you know my last customer? If the moment seems right, weave an affinity into the situation. So again, it might be helpful for you to try to see. So for example, I believe they said the beekeeper would come next. How would the beekeeper be related to the messenger? Well, I would probably have a mood to do my beekeeper. 1, my beekeeper would be pained and bruised. Maybe they were in love with the messenger. Did they get hurt? Did someone approach them to find out the news in the messenger. Maybe because we were close, the messenger was carrying some really important news. I was questioned as the beekeeper. I don't know. But that's sort of how I mean, like, you really have to build on the story as you make it, because otherwise it's just too broad. So you have to lean into the constraints of the game to really be able to direct the story. So I think that's a pretty good overview of this game. Again, it's not very big. It is relaxing. I think it does what it means to do very, very well. That said, if you choose to download it and you either don't get it, can't seem to make it work, or find it like it's too much work, that doesn't mean that either role-playing games or journaling games aren't for you. This is like the extreme. This is like, again, because it's so sparse, it's more difficult. It's very counterintuitive. If you had a bigger game with more prompts, more story building, more everything, your mind would come up with ideas more readily. Otherwise, again, be patient with yourself too. I've never played a game like this in a single setting. It's almost more like I go back to it, a few evenings, like I'm feeling chill, I'm sitting on my porch. I'm just coming up with my next visitor and seeing how it goes. And I have to say, it does get easier from visitor to visitor, because I'm world building through my questions and through the life of the people that came before. So it does become easier, and it is cool to see how, basically how the world comes alive through some very simple questions and through very minimal prompts. So I think I'll stop it there for the last tea shop. I'll put a link in the episode notes below just to link you to the itch store. That's itch.io. It's a website. Sorry, I don't know how many people are familiar. For a lot of smaller indie RPG designer publish their things there. Free PDF to download, very easy to access. While you're down there, if you have a preference and you want to let me know through the comments, do you want more free game? Do you want more journaling game? Do you want more tea game? Do you want something completely different? Again, I have a pretty broad collection. I'm almost paralyzed by the options. I'm trying to get people interested through my first videos. I could also do theme video. I know in my intro, a lot of people mention, how do you get into your character's head? So I do have that brewing in my mind. I was thinking about taking an RPG and showing how the character creation process is how I really get into it. And again, this is why this game is a little tricky in that sense, because you don't define anyone in depth. And anyway, I've gone too far, kind of off topic. Let me know if something you love. Otherwise, I'll just poke my way through it and see how it goes. Thank you very much for your time. Have a great day.